Good evening, my star-crossed Iracosaurus. The Zenless Zone Zero community has been working overtime to tank their reputation, and Mom said it's my turn to not beat the allegations. We have to talk about the rhino in the room, but we're not going to be weird about it. Please believe me, the asshats doing disturbing and hateful things must be tourists or baiters. It only takes a few minutes of gameplay before encountering Nicole and Anby. The devs had to tone down their relationship before launch. They're implied to be married in the bio though, and they worked in all of the romantic lines that had to be removed from chapter 1 into later events. They're not related and they have the same last name and they live together. Be so for real right now. This is the perfect segue into my most suspicious and disturbing lore theory. Call me chef du jour with the 10-course meal that I cooked up for you, because if I'm correct, Belle and Wise were never siblings and they're living a stand-up tragedy. Please check out part 1 to see the lore hole that I fell down and hit my head in to come to this concussion. Starting with my theory this time. I think someone is spying on Belle and Wise through the voice channel and eye implants. They're not really siblings, and they're hiding their real names behind the aliases Belle and Wise. We have a good amount of foreshadowing that it started happening before the story start, but the setup in season 1 with the mayor getting access to the HDD and relocating it away from random play forces this plotline into the main story. I suspect it's going to come to the surface during the season 2 climax and lead into the foreshadowed death and afterlife arc. For anyone new here, we know the prologue of ZZZ is a faith and myth retelling, and starting from chapter 1, all plotlines snatch stories from literature and plop them into the game. The writers have consistently chosen pieces that are connected through the author of the inspirational literature's real life to keep some sense of continuity. Most frequently, they guarantee good stories by using a piece of classic literature for an event story, and then using something connected to the first piece for the main story plot or subplot inspiration. They are typically more derivative with the lesser-known pieces of literature and things yoinked from history. Well, I found the book that they're using for Belle and Wise in the post-Faith and Myth retelling plotline. It's called Los Trabajos de Priscillius y Sigismunda, or The Labors of Priscillus and Sigismunda. It was written by Cervantes at the end of his life and published posthumously in 1617. I wasn't going to make this video, but I noticed my theory was discredited on vibes alone. So hear me out. I think the people who think I'm wrong should just read the book because the similarities are uncanny. I have a very long list of reasons why I think that this book is the inspiration for Belle and Wise, but these are the most compelling. I couldn't find a good way to go between each of these points, but list format, it works perfectly. Let's hop into it. The first one is blatantly obvious. In the prologue, Faithin loses their Faithin account, and at the end of the Faithin myth, Faithin is struck down with an arrow. Get this, in the first chapter of Priscillus and Sigismunda, Priscillus is literally shot with an arrow and he falls into the water during a storm. Okay, you're telling me that's not similar? Okay, well, I feel it is very similar, but we also know that Priscillus and Sigismunda have a very similar beginning. Like, they lose their kingdom to a war that is followed by a natural disaster. Belle and Wise lose their home during the fall of the old capital, which was caused by a war followed by a natural disaster. See what I'm saying? It's a little uncanny. Both duos are already living their new lives by the time the story starts. The book is called The Labors of Priscillus and Sigismunda, and the entirety of Belle and Wise's life on 6th Street has been working. They live in random play. Third point, Wise is sus about Fairy, and Periander, or Priscillus, is sus about Arnaldo. Fairy and Arnaldo consider Wise and Priscillus, respectively, the second assistant and adore Belle and Aristella. Now, I'm convinced that they are being spied on, particularly because of the comments in chapter 1, really resembles Priscillus trying to talk to Sigismunda through the letters. My fourth point, their status is an open secret, and the names are the real aliases. For Belle and Wise, we know that the Faithin account is a legendary proxy account, but everyone in New Eridu seems to know that Belle and Wise are actually Faithin. I believe that this is intentional. It's by design, and it is supposed to break our suspension of disbelief a tiny bit because we are supposed to question it. If not, it might be bad writing. I don't know. I hope it's good writing and we are supposed to question it. Because Persilis and Sigismunda, they changed their names to Periander and Oristella to hide their heritage and ties to the former kingdom. I think this makes sense to be used as inspiration for Belle and Wise because they are coming from Helios Academy and there is something innately special about them that we, as the audience, don't really know yet. We do know that it has to do with their connection to the ether, but that's it. My fifth point is that their situations that they go through in the story are very similar. We know that Wise loses Belle in the Hollow in Just Another Day in the video store, and Persilis loses Sigismunda on the island after their boat crashes during a storm. I have a quote about this in the quotes section, so please bear with me. I'm going to finish the list before I start yapping about that. Next, we know that Belle and Wise respond to stress very similarly to how Persilis and Sigismunda respond. So when they're separated, Belle and Sigismunda get jealous, anxious, and a little delulu. But we know that Persilis and Wise get depressed and frantic and then quickly fall into despair. So could be a coincidence, but I don't think so. I think it's very intentionally like that. That leads wonderfully into my seventh point. Terrible things keep happening to them. Like, aside from Belle getting lost in the Hollow and getting sick because of the ether corruption, and Sigismunda getting sick when she's lost on the island, we know that both Belle and Wise and Sigismunda and Persilis go through some very horrific things, like soul-crushing instances in their stories. But they always overcome it because they have each other and they have someone to constantly look forward to and rely on and work with. It really shows about the resilience of the human spirit. And out of all the tragedies, number 8 out of the coincidences really takes the cake. 2 deaths, but both are fake outs. Now, this is already written in the story for Persilis and Sigismunda of Persilis having the 2 fake out deaths. But in Zenless, we know that there is 1 fake out death already, and the second one has been so heavily foreshadowed that we know it's coming at this point. To lighten the mood with point 9, we're not going to talk about the bad things happening to them, but the bad things they do. Both duos have huge jealous streaks. For Belle and Wise, this manifests as the main character being very close to Fairy and the sibling or second assistant being a little jealous. We also see it with Astra. Now, on the surface, it's a little bit messy, but I did a lot of analyzing. We know that Belle prefers Evelyn. Like, she thinks Evelyn is prettier, and she has a huge crush on Evelyn. Wise has a crush on Astra. The writers and devs decided to just say it. Like, both of them are jealous. They say it as a joke, and they're like, oh, I got over it quick. But the truth is, those are real feelings. There's always a little bit of truth in a joke. This also mirrors Persilis and Sigismunda's interactions, specifically with the character Sinisphora. This is where Sigismunda gets super jealous that Sinisphora had already met Persilis and was already enamored by him. But the tables were turned. This is crazy. Sinisphora's dad was like, yo, can you put in a good word for me with your girl? I think she's pretty. If you do this, if you get her to marry me, you can have Periander. You do whatever you want with him. You can marry him. You have my blessing, but you got to get me that girl. It's unsuccessful, and the entire thing is exploring how both Periander and Oristella are super duper jealous characters. Like, both of them are having a breakdown moment over this. It's another one I have quotes for. We know they're similar in a multitude of ways. Persilis and Wise are gentle yappers who like history. They're both a little impulsive, but described as having practical wisdom. Sigismunda and Belle are also very similar. They're intelligent goobers who are surprisingly prudent. Even their goals are similar. Both duos are on the run, and exposing their real identities would be detrimental, but they're also making their way towards something. Persilis and Sigismunda are trying to go to Rome to start their new life. But Belle and Wise are trying to go to the old capital to get to Helios Academy to get the evidence to clear Carol and their name so that they could start their new life. If we're talking about Helios Academy, we could also talk about the photo in the staff room of the 4 students. We know that this also aligns with Perseus and Sigismunda because the girl is most likely still alive, but we know the guy in the background of the photo most likely passed away, very similar to Perseus's brother showing up like towards the end of the book and dying. Okay, Sigismunda's sister shows up literally at the end and marries Arnaldo, which somehow saves Perseus's life. Like, that's enough to convince Arnaldo to like give them all the resources he could. And yeah, he makes a miraculous recovery. I'm sorry, I'm spoiling it for you. It was a fake out death. And my 13th reason. Both duos have to refer to each other as siblings in private, like they're reiterating a point or reminding the person who is currently spying on them that they're siblings. And then they say the most out-of-pocket shit that they could possibly cook up. Just so you know, real siblings don't remind themselves that they're siblings, and they certainly do not do anything that Belle and Wise do, or Perseus and Sigismunda do. It's clearly meant to be the same. Come on. Like, we are supposed to be suspicious of them. In both the reader reading the book and the player playing the game, we are supposed to be suspicious of them because what the hell are they doing? Because even the characters in the pieces of media are also responding to them like that. The audience is supposed to as well. Now, I could yap about this endlessly, but the best way for me to show you exactly what I mean is to show you the quotes that make it obvious that the writers of Zenless Zone Zero are using this book as inspiration for Belle and Wise. In Book 1, Chapter 3, it says, "Finally, the metamorphosis of Periander being completed, they put out a little to sea in order to be seen by the barbarians. The hurry Arnaldo was in is to hear something of Auristella had prevented him from first ascertaining from Periander who he and his sister were, and by what accidents he had been brought into this miserable condition in which he was found. All this, according to the natural order of things, should have preceded the confidence reposed in him. But, as is common with lovers occupied solely by the thought of seeking means to arrive at the desired end of their wishes rather than in the curiosity concerning other people's affairs, he never found time to inquire concerning that which it would have been well for him to have known, and which he came to know afterwards when the knowledge did him no good." Okay, so remember, the Greek and Roman myths were generally about change, and Ovid's version of the myths was literally called metamorphoses. Perseus' transformation in this scene was drag, and it's hilarious that he finds Sigismunda dressed as a man at the same party once he gets to the island. But I definitely think that this is one of the first instances where it is discussing exactly what the faith and myth is discussing, which is transformation is pain, and pain brings about transformation. In chapter 21 of book 2, Periander is having a small meltdown over losing Auristella, which is very similar to Wise's meltdown when he loses Belle. "We swept all these seas," continued Periander, "circumnavigated nearly every island round about, everywhere acquiring for tidings of my sister. It seemed to me, and doubtless may be the thought of every great beauty, that charms such as hers cannot remain concealed, and that the light of her loveliness must shine out. Let the place where she is confined be ever so dark, and her exceeding great prudence, I trusted, would be the clue whereby to extricate her from any labyrinth." We already established that Belle has a lot of connections to the sun and ZZZ, but this is a constant for Sigismunda as well, whose beauty is constantly compared to the sun. The sun is a prominent feature in most Spanish art of the time because they had the Sun Kingdom thing before Louis XIV. Be so for real right now. The hollows are the Dev's take on the labyrinths, and the Interknot is a reference to tying knots in the rope that is used while embarking into the labyrinth in almost every culture's version of it. It's a theme in both the book and the game, that these islands are similar to the hollows with their labyrinth nature. These are some of the other quotes that I find to be relevant to Zenless Zone Zero and the writer's use of this book in making their story. Some of these are proving it's a Hellenistic love story through a Spanish Catholic 1600s lens, and others are similar to the feeling the Zenless writers are trying to invoke in the players. Now, in my last video, I got a few comments saying that this book had nothing to do with Greek mythology. But hear me out. This is one of the quotes. Arnaldo was already in the boat and had nearly reached the shore when Periander advanced to meet him. But Oristella moved not from the spot where she first placed her foot, and had almost wished that there she might take root and be transformed into twisted boughs, as was the daughter of Peneus when pursued by the light-footed Apollo. Okay, I've already talked about Apollo, Helios, and like the important ones from mythology. Be so for real. I'm not going crazy. That's definitely in the book. I think this next quote perfectly encapsulates the way the Zenless Zone Zero writers borrowed from Persilis and Sigismunda, particularly with the tragedies that both duos must face and how they overcome them. Periander, impelled by his generous feelings, instantly went in, and in a few minutes they saw him on top of the tower engaged with a seeming madman, from whom he had taken a knife and was trying to defend himself. But fate had determined that the tragedy of the man's life should end here, and both fell together from the height on the ground below. The madman had stabbed himself with the knife and Periander held, and Periander's eyes and nose and mouth were streaming with blood. As for he had no petticoats to sustain him, the fall took its full effect, and he lay lifeless upon the earth. Just like Zenless, it's a fake-out death. The next chapter says, in the meantime, Periander still lay senseless on the bed where they had placed him, and where the surgeons came to see him and set the dislocated bones. They gave him medicines proper for his case, felt his pulse, and by degrees he came a little to himself and knew some of the persons who stood round him, especially Oristella, to whom in a scarcely audible voice he said, "Sister, I die in the holy Catholic faith, and I die loving you." He could say no more and did not speak again at that time. Okay, this next quote, it had me cackling when I encountered it in the book because it's exactly how I feel about Belle and Wise, and I do think it's good writing in Zenless Zone Zero if this is the intended purpose. "I understand you not, Lady Oristella," here said Antonio, "for in your discourse you sometimes speak of Periander as your brother and sometimes not. Tell us who he is and who you are if you can tell it. For whether he is your brother or no, at least you cannot deny that you are of high birth, and I speak of myself and my sister Constance, are not so inexperienced as to be astonished at anything you can relate, for since we have left the barbarous isle and the troubles and perils that we have seen and passed through that taught us a great deal, and by very small sign, we can discover the thread of the most difficult affairs, especially those of love, for it appears that they bring their own explanation with them. What if Periander should not be your brother, and what if you are his lawful wife? And again, it is not much that of you have conducted yourselves with such modesty and purity of the manners in the sight of heaven and of all those who have been in your company. Love is not always rash and inconsiderate, nor are all lovers influenced by mere sensual feelings, but by the charm of the heart and the mind, and it begins thus, dear lady. Again, I entreat that you will treat us, who you are and who is Periander. You seemed as he passed us just now to carry away a volcano in his eyes and a gag in his mouth." Y'all can't tell me it's not funny that the younger Antonio pulls Oristella aside and is like, "This is weird. Why are you acting like this?" The audience wants to have an aside with the main characters, Belle and Wise, and say, "Why are you acting like this? This is weird. This is weird." This next quote isn't really a quote, it's more like a section because it shows three characters interacting. It just happens so frequently that the characters in the book are very suspicious of Oristella and Periander, but also there's plenty of times in the Zenless Zone Zero story where the audience and the player is supposed to be very suspicious of Belle and Wise. If not, it's creepy writing. If it is intentional, then it's excellent and it plays into different cultural norms around the world. So let's just get into the quote. "Alas, my friend," replied Oristella, "so it is that I am forced to keep perpetual silence over this pilgrimage I am upon, which seems doomed to be endless unless life should end first. I'm obliged to keep it. If you knew who I am, would to heaven that you might know, you would see the exculpation of my fears, for you would know what has then given them birth. You would see misfortunes unlooked for and labyrinths from whose mazes you would not conceive it possible to escape. You would see how strong can be the bond of fraternal love. Sigismunda keeps yapping to Transilla, and then she says, "Remember, lady," answered Transilla, "that all this which the captain has been relating happened before the time of the captivity in the barbarous isle, and that since you have both seen and discoursed with your brother, and you have not found that he loves nobody as he loves you, and cares for nothing but to please you, but I do not believe that jealousy can ever be so strong as to divide a sister from her brother." Okay, and now you need some context. Her dad literally says you can't just talk about that. You can't be like, this is weird. And he says, "Daughter," said old Maurice, "the effects of human love are often as different as they are unreasonable. Do you endeavor to be prudent and discreet enough, not to try and fathom the thoughts of others, nor desire to know more than they choose to tell you themselves? Curiosity about one's neighbor's affairs is to be censured and avoided." It's literally the Mean Girls scene where the one is like, "If you're from Africa, why are you white?" And the other is like, "You can't just ask someone why they're white." Like, it's literally that, but over the most cursed situation. So, I mean, come on, guys. This is exactly what the audience in Zenless Zone Zero is supposed to be experiencing. We're supposed to question it. People who are into this are creepy. They're weird because the plot twist hasn't happened yet. But this is like almost a guarantee that there is going to be a plot twist about Belle and Wise. And again, I want to reiterate that the main point of this theory was to say that Belle and Wise are not their real names and that someone is spying on them through the voice channel and the eye implants. Like, that was the theory. This is how I came to that conclusion, because Persilis and Sigismunda were constantly being spied on and followed throughout the story, and they have their aliases. We know that Persilis becomes Periander and Sigismunda becomes Oristella. Knowing all of this and adding in the context that Belle and Wise are already shown to be comfortable lying to the characters in the story, I think it's more believable that they're lying about being siblings and the other characters are just putting words in their mouth. I know a few people commented that it was confirmed several times in season 2 that they are blood related, but it's not. If a character that isn't Belle and Wise are saying it, they clearly do not know if it is or isn't true. But also, Belle and Wise are supposed to be lying about this, so we expect them to say yes when they are asked, just because of the context that they're not alone when they are talking, because someone else has access to the voice channel and their eye implants. So, I'm still shocked at how many similarities there are between the two stories, but I'm eager to know what you think. Tell me all your thoughts, and if you like these deranged deep dives, please hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much. I will see you in the next one.
不过我记得好像